Hey folks, today I'd like to share with you, a minor technique which involves, just how to mark up your horoscope as you scan it and kind of prepare yourself for a deeper analysis. And the virtue of this is once you do it, then when you go back to that horoscope a month later or a year later, you've already done this basic work and you can sort of get right back into it much quicker. So this is something that I teach to all my beginner students. And, I think it's something that everybody should do, although I suspect many people do not do anything like this. So I think it's a little bit of a step up to improve your analytic technique. Anyway, without further ado, let's jump into this. Okay, so here's a horoscope in which I've intentionally suppressed the name and the birth data of the individual so as to give no clue of identity. There's no real rationale as to why I chose this. It just kind of turned up when I was thinking about doing this kind of a presentation. And in fact, the horoscope has a few positive features and really no negatives. So it's a good example, and it's relatively simple, to illustrate the things that I want to do. So, I mean, you can all take a glance at this and see that, the ascendant is Gemini, and in the first house we have the Sun and Mercury and Venus, Mars in the Leo third house, Moon in a Libra in fifth house, K2 in a Sagittarian seventh, Saturn in a Capricornian eighth, and Jupiter in a Piscean 10th. So, many of you may recognize what's going on here, but just to make this, patently obvious, what I do is go to work on a horoscope like this with a red pen and mark in the dignities that are obvious to us all. So here's an example of after I've marked those in, here's what we get. I'll walk you through each of these. So in the first house, as most people probably recognize, Mercury is in Gemini in its own sign. And so the code that, visual code that I use for this is a round bracket around a planet that occupies its own sign. So Mercury in Gemini, give it a round bracket. I put a Bindu on top of Mercury because that is my symbol for Digbala. As you know, Mercury and Jupiter in the first house, and Moon and Venus in the fourth, and Saturn in the seventh, and Sun and Mars in the 10th, all form Digbala. So in this instance, it's only Mercury that qualifies because it's in the right place. So we look at the rest of these grahas, Sun and Venus in Gemini, there's no particular dignity. We move on to the third house, Mars in Leo, no particular dignity. Moon in Libra, likewise. K2 in Sagittarius. Now, there's, opinion that you'll see in certain Shastra that Rahu and Ketu, enjoy being in Gemini, Sagittarius. I'm not abiding by that rule here, so I'm going to skip that over. But when we come to Saturn, okay, no argument there. Saturn is in its own sign, Capricorn. Therefore, I have a circular bracket around it. Even though every retrograde planet is always marked with a big R, to make it evident, I like to just accentuate that and put an underline beneath that graha, which is Saturn in this case, just to, make sure that it's noticed that planet is retrograde. Then moving on to the 10th house, Jupiter in Pisces. That's an instance of Swarashi. So we put round brackets around Jupiter. So now at a glance, you can look at this horoscope right away and seeing that both Mercury and Jupiter are in their own signs in Kendras. These two form two of the Panchamahaparusha yogas. Mercury in its own sign in the Kendra forms Bhadra Yoga. Jupiter in its own sign in the Kendra forms Hamsa Yoga. So we're off to a good start. Here's a person that's got two of these Mahapurusha yogas. Mercury and Jupiter, both being involved with, analytic skills, communication skills, knowledge, wisdom, etc. I mean, this could be the horoscope of of a writer, a teacher, a consultant, any of those things. Now, I'm not going to get into the weeds here as far as interpreting the horoscope. My objective here is just to show you a process by which I'm going to highlight with a red pen, mark up the dignities for the grahas in the horoscope so that we can, in subsequent review, see that stuff instantly. On my main printout that I use for all client consultations, side by side with the D1, what's called the Rashi Kundali, I always display, the D9, the Navamsha, and the D10, the Dashamsha. Because, these are the two topics that people are always interested in, relationships and career. So I do the same thing with respect to highlighting planets in their own signs, or as we'll see here, something else. So in the Navamsha, we can cut straight to the chase. See, everything here is ordinary by sign, except for Venus, which is in its own sign, Libra. So again, I put a round bracket around that. We could mark them in if they existed, but there is no instance of this in either of these amshas, instances of Digbala, none present in the D9 or the D10. So there's no bindus over anything. However, moon, I have highlighted here with a circle around it. And the circle is the graphical notation that I use for a planet that is exalted, because moon is exalted in Taurus. So that's why it's got a little circle around it. And that's it for the D9. Nothing else going on in terms of dignities. When we move to the D10, if we go through each of these grahas sign by sign, there's nothing going on there either, neither in their own sign, nor in their sign of exaltation, nor their sign of debilitation, any of which I'm prepared to mark up. Now, I don't bother putting a notation under Saturn retrograde again. It's already marked in the main chart. We don't obsess about it quite so much as when we go into the amshas. So I've not duplicated that effort there. Because they're smaller charts, I don't want to clutter them up with too much redlining anyway. Now, the one thing you might notice here, here's a new sort of notation. What does this mean? Well, moon is in Gemini, the sign of Mercury, while Mercury is in Cancer, the sign of the moon. So this symbol here, or kind of just a curved bracket beneath the grahas concerned, indicates a parivartana situation. Moon is in the sign of Mercury, while Mercury is in the sign of moon. You have to draw in two of these to indicate the pair of planets that are thus engaged. Okay, and that's it. Now we've done the Rashi, we've done the D9, and we've done the D10. At a glance, when you come back to this at some later date, it'll be immediately obvious to you what is notable in this horoscope regarding the traditional Parashari Avastas, the dignities. Now, the next step that we want to do, or that I encourage my students to do, is this. Now, what I've done here is marked in all the aspects for all the grahas. I've marked the aspects into the outer rim of the horoscope. Let me illustrate. The first house is occupied by Sun, Mercury, and Venus. As we know, Sun, Mercury, and Venus exert only the standard aspect, the seventh house aspect, seventh house away from where they themselves sit. So, Sun, Mercury, and Venus all aspect the seventh house. Here's the seventh house, and in the border of the horoscope, just outside the seventh house, I've marked in Sun and Mercury and Venus to indicate that those grahas are now influencing that seventh house. Then we can move on, through the order of the houses. So if we go to Mars, Mars in the third house, as everyone knows, Mars aspects any sign of 4, 7, and 8 away. So Mars aspects 4 away, and that goes into the sixth house. And there you see in the rim of the sixth house, you see the two-letter abbreviation for Mars. Mars also aspects 7 away, as does every graha. And there's Mars on the rim of the ninth house, opposite from where it sits in the third. Mars also exerts an aspect 8 houses away, 8 signs away. And so Mars also acts aspects the 10th house. And here's the two-letter abbreviation for Mars, just at the apex of the 10th house. And that's it for Mars, aspects 4, 7, and 8 away. Then we move to the moon. The moon is one of those grahas that only aspects the 7th house away. And so 7th house away from the 5th is the 11th. And there I mark the symbol for the moon into the rim of the 11th house. Come to Ketu. Well, I'm not marking in aspects for Rahu and Ketu. I'll come back to that in just a moment. Come to Saturn. And we know Saturn aspects 3, 7, and 10 away. So Saturn is here in the 8th, so 3 houses away is the 10th. And there's the symbol for Saturn at the apex of the 10th house. Saturn aspects 7 away, and that's the 2nd house. And there's the symbol for Saturn at the rim of the 2nd house. Saturn also aspects signs 10 away from where it sits. And so here's 10 away from Capricorn is Libra, and I mark Saturn on the edge of the 5th house, which is occupied by Libra. Last but not least, we come to Jupiter, and as everyone knows, Jupiter aspects 5, 7, and 9 away. So Jupiter aspects 5 away, and that's into the 2nd house, and there's the symbol for Jupiter on the edge of the 2nd house. Jupiter aspects 7 away, and there's Jupiter's symbol at the apex of the 4th house. And Jupiter aspects 9 away, and there's Jupiter marked into the rim of the 6th house. Now, if you've done this correctly, you must go, well, to confirm that you have done it correctly, you must go and count up all these aspects around the rim of the chart and make sure they add up to a special number. Let me do this right now. 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5, and 6, and 7, 8, 9, and 10, 11, 12, and 13. There is your magic number. If you've done this correctly, marked in the proper aspects for all of the visible saptagrahas, you will get 13 notations around the rim of the horoscope. If you do this too quickly, you might miss 1 or 2. It happens to me all the time. That's why it's my hard and fast rule, a check at the end, count the aspects marked in around the rim at the end of your process, and make sure you've got 13. If more than that or less than that, you've done it wrong, go back and check your work. Okay, so we know that this is done right. Now, I did not mark in aspects for Rahu or Ketu. I know some people advocate, they are in the minority, but some people will advocate using 5 and 9 aspects for Rahu and Ketu, aspects similar to what are exerted by Jupiter. And, there are even some other more arcane rules. Well, I come from a school, a lineage that discourages doing that. Not to say you never could do it, but Rahu and Ketu are the head and tail of the celestial serpent. Rahu is the head. If there were eyes to see and cast an aspect, they could only come from Rahu, which is the head that has the eyes. Ketu has no eyes. Therefore, logically, Ketu could never, exert any aspects. So perhaps only Rahu would cast those 5 house and 9 house away aspects, in which case that would increase your count to 15. But I discourage that. Rahu and Ketu are a polar axis. There's no need to indicate any aspects. They cover each other's back. You have an axis of evil, if you like, Rahu, Ketu. That's enough. You don't need giving them any more influence. Okay, so that's where I draw the line. No aspects for Rahu and Ketu. You can do what you want, but I'm recommending that you keep it simple and just mark in aspects for the saptagrahas. Once you've done that, you're now ready for a final step, similar to what we did initially with looking at grahas who occupy their own or exalted or debilitated signs. So that last step is circle around the horoscope and look for any graha that aspects a sign that it owns. So I'll start here at the first house where there are no aspects, and then look at the second. Jupiter and Saturn aspect the second, which is Cancer. Neither of them rule that sign. Now, don't get sidetracked thinking, oh, Jupiter is exalted in Cancer. Shouldn't that get some kind of a favor? No. We're only interested in a graha that aspects a sign that it owns. So Jupiter and Saturn neither own Cancer. We go to the third house, Mars occupies, there's no aspect. Jupiter aspects the Virgo fourth. Does Jupiter own Virgo? No. Saturn aspects the Libran fifth. Does Saturn own Libra? No. Yes, Saturn is exalted there, but we don't care. We're just interested in when a graha aspects a sign / house that it is also the lord of. Not happening here. Come to the sixth house. We get a hit. This is Scorpio. Mars aspects the sixth house, which is Scorpio. Jupiter doesn't own Scorpio, so no consideration there. But now in this instance, I put a bracket around Mars. Why? I want to indicate that Mars aspects a sign that it owns. And so, in Shastra, they will say, a house that is aspected by its lord is strengthened and protected. So the takeaway from this then is that the sixth is a strong house by virtue of being aspected by its owner Mars, and for bonus points, it's aspected by a benefic as well too. But the key thing is the sixth is aspected by its lord Mars. We move on to the seventh house. That's Sagittarius. Does Sun, Mercury, or Venus rule Sagittarius? No. Saturn in the eighth, well, that's already the lord in its own house, so that's obviously a strength. Ninth house is Aquarius, aspected by Mars. Does Mars own Aquarius? No. So no notation. Jupiter owns the Piscean 10th, and the 10th is aspected by Mars and Saturn, neither of which own Pisces, so no, notation for them. And then last but not least, the moon aspects Aries 11th house, but the moon doesn't own Aries, so no notation for that. So the end of all this, we can look back and we can say with confidence, there are 4 strong houses in this horoscope. The first house, because it is occupied by its lord Mercury. The sixth house, because it is aspected by its lord Mars. The eighth house, because it is occupied by its lord Saturn. And the 10th house, because it is occupied by its lord Jupiter. Now, I'm not going to get into interpretation here. This is really just, showing you a process so that you can identify strong planets. This is an element of graha vichara, to identify the avastas, the dignities of the grahas, whether they be, there's a spectrum of them. By sign, it's, Swarashi, its own sign, it's Ucha, exalted, Nicha, debilitated. And then, in terms of visibility, there's combustion versus retrogression, there's planetary war and eclipse. So a number of other things, and we're not going to get to all of them in one horoscope. I'm starting with this horoscope because it's relatively simple. So that's all on the level of just the horoscope, the Rashi Kundali, and as I've thrown in here for sort of to illustrate a few other things that weren't evident in the D1. The moon was exalted in the D9, and there was a Parivartana in the D10. So we're done with that, in terms of using a red pen on your horoscope itself. There's one other thing that I always do when I look at a horoscope, and that is refer to the table that almost always accompanies the horoscope, and see different displays are available depending on what software you use. I'm a champion of Parashara's Light. I've been using it for almost 30 years. I like the way it works and it does everything I want it to. So this is the layout here, and this table is, sort of, set up of my own design, the listing of the planets, their degrees, indications as to whether anything is retrograde, Saturn only, or combust, Mercury in this case, but, barely combust because it's I forget, more than 20 degrees away from the sun, so it's hardly combust at all. And then, the planet listing by sign and by nakshatra. And then, this is a detailed listing of the the ruler of the nakshatra and the sub of the nakshatra and the sub-sub. For those of you who might be interested in Krishnamurti Padati, which I am, that's why I've got in my table. And then there's this, kind of a traditional dignities column to indicate planets, whether they're in signs of enemy, their own sign, etc., etc. And then a Shad Bala indicator, and then, the seven Charakarikas that are used in Jaimini, and, Vimshotri listing. Okay, so here's what I'm interested in that I want to dig into, and I'll show you a little bit of what I do here and why I do it. So if we go down through, here's what I'm interested in. I'm interested in going planet by planet down this little column here, which is the nakshatra lordship column. So basically what this is saying, the ascendant is in a Mars nakshatra, the sun is in a Rahu nakshatra, moon is in a Jupiter nakshatra, Vishaka, and so on and so forth. What I am looking for is to see if any of these grahas occupies its own nakshatra, or is there the equivalent of a parivartana on the nakshatra level, what is called a nadi yoga. So let me illustrate. So sun is in the nakshatra of Rahu, and right away I go down and check Rahu and say, okay, it's in a nakshatra of Jupiter, no hit. Then moon is in a nakshatra of Jupiter. Scoot down to Jupiter and say Jupiter is in a nakshatra of Mercury. Okay, no hit there. Mars is in a nakshatra of Venus. Scoot down to Venus and say Venus is in the nakshatra of Mars. Oh, okay. Mars in Venus nakshatra, while Venus is in Mars nakshatra. So this is an instance of Nadi Yoga, where each of these two grahas is in the nakshatra of the other. Now, I personally am interested in that, partly because, I'm an advocate of KP, or Krishnamurti Padati, where, awareness of this comes in useful. Anyway, so I've done that. Now let me continue. Mercury is in a nakshatra of Mars. Okay, we've already touched upon Mars, and we know it's not in a Mercury nakshatra, so we move on. Jupiter is in a nakshatra of Mercury, and we've already dealt with Mercury, so we know there's no reciprocity there. Venus we've already done. Saturn's in the nakshatra of Mars, and I've already done Mars earlier, so I know there's no exchange going on with Saturn. Rahu's in nakshatra of Jupiter. In fact, I'd done that earlier because the sun was in a Rahu nakshatra, and I went to check Rahu right away. And lastly, I get to Ketu, which is in a sun nakshatra, but I've already done the sun. I know it's in a Rahu nakshatra. So long story short, there's just one pair of Nadi yogas in here, which is an exchange of nakshatra lords. So each are, Venus and Mars are in each other's nakshatra. I also go and check this column here just to make sure that I didn't miss it when I was marking up the Rashi Kundali itself. But yes, I did get Mercury in its own sign. I did see Jupiter in its own sign. And I did see Saturn in its own sign. But I always double check this just in case, maybe I'm going too quickly and I missed it in the chart markup. Now, the last thing I do here on the level of observing what grahas fall within what nakshatras, I run down these columns, looking for how many times does Sun nakshatra appear? Once. How many times does Moon nakshatra appear? None. How many times does Mars nakshatra appear? 1, 2, 3. Okay, I'll mark anything 3 or more, I'm interested. So I marked this down here. Mars appears 3 times. That means 3 different grahas sit in Mars nakshatras. That's interesting for me. Let me continue. After Mars comes Mercury. So we scan on here, there's one Mercury, and that's it, that's all. And then I'm going to look for Jupiter. There's a Jupiter, and there's another Jupiter, but it's only two. Not going to get excited about that. Then move to Venus. There's one Venus there. It's only one. Look for Saturn. Nothing in Saturn nakshatras. Move to Rahu. Rahu once, and that's it. That's all. And then Ketu, none. Okay, so bottom line, I've scanned the positions of all the grahas in the nakshatras, and the only thing that I've found interesting for me is that 3 different grahas occupy Mars nakshatras. Okay, why do I find that interesting? Here's why. There's a theory of Krishnamurti Padati that when a period lord runs, and that could be either a dasha or a bhukti, so the navagrahas, the 7 visible planets and the nodes, they each hold sway over their respective dasha, and within each dasha there are 9 bhuktis as well too. So each of the grahas gets a turn to, exert some sway on an individual's life. The theory within KP says that when a period lord runs, it will primarily give results for its nakshatra dispositor. Now, it will give results for itself as well too, but it foremost attempts to deliver on behalf of its nakshatra lord. So what does this mean? When 3 grahas are in Mars nakshatra, this means that 3 different dashas or 3 different bhukti lords will primarily give results for Mars. So just to flag those again, that's in Mercury dasha or bhukti, Venus dasha or bhukti, and Saturn dasha or bhukti. Those are the 3 grahas that reside in a Mars nakshatra. So 3 out of 9 grahas will strive to give results for Mars in this horoscope. 3 out of 9 grahas. That means 1/3 of the time in any dasha, three bhuktis will be attempting to deliver on behalf of Mars. Here's another little extra nugget of info. What are these grahas? Mercury, period of 19 years. Venus, period of 20 years. Saturn, period of 17 years. Sorry, I got that backwards. It was Saturn 19, Mercury 17. My point is that these are 3 of the longest running dashas in the Vimshotri dasha system. Therefore, they're also long running bhuktis, no matter what dasha they appear in. So that may be, informative to our analysis as well too. What analysis? Well, let's scoot all the way back to this horoscope here, which we've now marked up, and we'll say that in a lifetime, there are obvious strengths here. We've got a Bhadra yoga, we've got a Hamsa yoga, we've got a powerful 8th lord. They're all going to, have their effects in the course of life. But when all of these, no matter what dasha runs, when the bhuktis come up for, what did we say, Mercury, Venus, and Saturn, they're all going to activate this Mars. So then it's pertinent to look at Mars in this horoscope and say, well, Mars occupies the 3rd, it rules the 6th and the 11th, and it is particularly powerful on behalf of the 6th. Now, if you know your house classifications, you might recognize that the 3rd, the 6th, the 10th, and the 11th are all what we call upachaya houses. So in this instance, Mars is activating by occupation, 1 upachaya, the 3rd, activating by ownership and aspect. Remember, we consider the 6th now a very sound, protected, solid, robust house because Mars aspects its own. The 6th is another upachaya. The 10th, as it happens, Mars also aspects the 10th. And sorry, did I say the 11th? I didn't mean to earlier. So Mars, oh yes, it owns the 11th. So we've got activation by occupation of the 3rd, by aspect of the 6th, and ownership of the 6th, and ownership of the 11th and aspect of the 10th. So we've got 4 Upachaya houses, all activated by Mars. So this might well say that in the course of this individual's life, for every Mercury, Venus, and Saturn bhukti or dasha that runs, it will be activating this Mars, which will actually be quite competitive. The acquisition and practice of skills, Mars in the 3rd house, performance of some kind, whether that be athletic or artistic, could be possible. 6th house lordship protected, 6th house protected by lordship and aspect. Competitive zeal. 10th house, certain public presence, and some success, in terms of financial reward for efforts put in. Now, Mars aspects the 9th too, and I'm just not, obsessing on it because it's not part of my thesis in this respect. Because as many planets play a role in a hybrid way on so many houses in the horoscope that you're basically looking for confluence and themes that you can tease out and say something about horoscope and therefore the life of the individual. So how do we get here? I mean, a process of marking in with a red pen the dignities, the avastas for each of the grahas, marking in the aspects that each of the grahas make to the 12 bhavas, then highlighting those bhavas which are aspected by their lord and thereby strengthened, and then inspecting the table to see, confirm that we noted all the avastas, and also take note of any activation of star lords, nakshatra dispositors, as the dashas and bhuktis present themselves. So this is the first of, I'll do a couple more of these just to illustrate, some of the other notations and, probably by chance, some of the observations that will turn up in this kind of exercise. So if you're not doing this already, I strongly encourage you to do so. It's very useful to make obvious what is weak, strong, or, for that matter, indifferent in the horoscope. And it could very easily highlight stuff that form, little nuggets of theory, conjecture, and prediction, which is, what we're always trying to do. Okay, that's it for today.